had to be stringy by now. But how would she know? She hadn't taken a half-second to check herself in the mirror before she'd set out for her hour on her own. Her sudden self-consciousness had nothing to do with AJ, a happily married father of 2 young children, or Elijah, a Special Forces soldier who'd left Vermont at 19, all but kicked out of town by his own father. No, Hannah thought. Sean was the Cameron who could have her forget she was a top law student and a successful businesswoman. Nothing new there. All 3 were competent, good-looking men anyone would want to have as allies and rescuers, and dread to have as enemies. Their sister, Rose, the youngest, one of Hannah's closest friends, was likewise competent and attractive, but she was out of town with Ranger, her search-and-rescue dog. Sean was considered the charmer of the 3 brothers, but only in contrast to AJ and Elijah. Hannah had never been intimidated by any of them, but that didn't mean she didn't wish they hadn't come to town tonight. As she sipped the last of her wine, Sean seemed just now to see her. He smiled that devastating smile she'd first noticed back in high school Latin class, when she'd been an eager freshman, at 13, a year younger than most other freshmen, and he'd been a bored senior, a star athlete who'd had no interest in Latin. He'd just needed a class that fit his schedule and provided the needed credits for him to graduate. She remembered a rainy afternoon when she was the sole student who had known that Dido and Aeneas was a Henry Purcell opera based on the tragic love affair between the Queen of Carthage and a Trojan refugee. Proud of her answer, Hannah had heard laughter behind her. No idea what it was about, she'd turned around and saw Sean Cameron's smile, those blue eyes, and realized he was laughing at her. She hadn't let him see how mortified she was, and had redoubled her efforts to maintain an A in class. Not that it was much of a victory when Sean was happy to squeak by with a D. What did he care about an A in Latin? He was on to bigger and better things. She tipped her glass to him now and gave him a warm but reserved smile. She wasn't 13 anymore, and as sexy and appealing as all the Cameron men were, she'd never had any serious romantic interest in Sean or his brothers. She had plans of her own, ones that wouldn't fit into the life of a driven, blue-eyed Cameron. Out of the corner of her eye, she watched Bowie O'Rourke raise his beer with a calloused, scarred hand. He'd first learned his trade working after school and summers with Hannah's father, Tobias Shea, who'd led his own troubled life before ramming his car into a tree 16 years ago. She had learned not to speak of her father in Black Falls. Who remembered him now? Who even wanted to? "I do," Hannah whispered. She stared at her Chardonnay, wondering where the words had come from. Why was Bowie even in Black Falls? Short-fused and on the verge of doing time, he had finally figured out that he and his hometown weren't a good mix, and moved up to Burlington 10 years ago. Last October, he'd purchased his family's old place out on the river. He'd spent the rest of the fall and the winter fixing it up, and had moved in a few weeks ago. Hannah could see her father leading her and Bowie through the woods above the river as they searched for old cellar holes, the foundations of long-abandoned homes. He'd imagined where those early Vermont settlers had ended up. Ohio, Wisconsin, San Francisco? He'd turn to them with a grin and ask why his ancestors hadn't cleared out of northern New England. He and Bowie both had always been at their happiest, their most controlled, in the woods. Hannah wasn't yet 14 when her father died. Her younger brothers didn't remember him at all. Devin was 2, Toby just 1. 9 years later, they lost their mother to an infection from a tick bite. Hannah had navigated the legal battles to become her brother's legal guardian. They were 18 and 17 now. They'd be out on their own before long. A loud male voice shouting insults from a table toward the back of the bar drew Hannah's attention. She didn't think the insults were directed at anyone in particular, but she didn't intend to stick around.